Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the media show. Nick Palavita, I'll be your host for today, assuming I can get other people to take over. Um, but we have a great panel, a great topic we're going to be discussing today. And with it, let's quickly bring in the panel. You'll recognize this person who's the famous co-author of The Millionaire Next Door, also co-author of Richer Than a Millionaire. Let's bring in the Honorable Bill Denko. Bill, welcome to the show. You sold 4 million copies. 4 million copies. I just want to remind the audience, that's not the easiest thing in the world to do, I must admit. With that, we also have some other people we're going to bring on. This gentleman is actually the former Associate Dean of the University of South Dakota School of Law, a JD, LLM, EDD. Let's bring in the Honorable Dan Worthington. Dan, welcome to the show. Good to have you
Hi,
here.
everyone.
I have some other shows for you to be on. The last one I had the Cato Institute on. Okay, but the first time I've been with somebody from the Cato Institute, but we'll get you on with this guy. He's pretty good. This person is also pretty good. He actually has his JD from Harvard Law School and his PhD from Harvard Law School, a professor at Duke University in rhetoric. Can you imagine majoring in that? Let's bring in George Gopin. George, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Happy to be here.
Rhetoric, of all things. See what happens on Bill Denko's book, which he sold 4 million copies. He should have gave it to you. Then maybe he sold 8 million copies, right? You never know about that type of stuff. I certainly don't know about that. And with that, we're also bringing one of our co-producers on from the online dinner party who holds together the glue of the IBM TV Pod TV network, the glue master himself. Let's bring in Mark Lee. Mark, welcome back to the show. He multitasks, by the way. People don't know that. He'll be doing 2 things at once while he's on the network. My other business partner does that also, Mark. So I totally understand. Max will work here and then he'll do a meeting at the same time. I had to do one of those. They're not fun. And speaking of not fun, we're going to bring in our special guest for a day. He's not fun at all. He's actually a former lieutenant colonel of the United States Air Force. And he's also written a new book, which we're going to look at today. Let's bring in the person who's going to be in trouble, the ones that you can throw all your questions to. Let's bring in the Honorable Chris Greco. Chris, welcome to the show. We're going to be discussing your book and dissecting it with some of the biggest dissectors in the world. First of all, let's go. Where is your book? I got it here. Here it is. The United States of America. He's talking about. And I got the invasion and occupation. I got the novel, but it could be true.
I got the cover on PDF. If you want to, I'm sharing my screen, so if you want to throw that on.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at pressing buttons.
There
we go. There it is. The United States of America. Can you believe this? If you look at his book and you read it, invasion and occupation. It should be the divided states of America.
Well, actually, it's the untied states of America. That's why it's what? It's untied states of America.
Untied states of America.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. So it's your book. It's your problem. So what we'll do is we'll let you lead the discussion. What is this book about?
So basically, it's a work of fiction, and Evan Mercer, by the way, read the book and gave me some great comments on it. But basically what happens is that the country starts to split into different regions. Those regions are think-alikes, right? So everybody wants to think alike. So they start establishing regions where everybody thinks alike. So, you got the Northeast region, you got the Southeast region, you got the Central region, you got all these different regions. They're still America, but they're kind of these different regions. They haven't quite split into countries. They're still part of some whole conglomerate, but they have their own constitutions, they have their own barter trade aspects, they have their own, all the things that would come together in a big country are now part of different regions aspects. I got this idea because a lot of the times federal government does that. They'll split you into regions. Literally, when I was in NSA, when I was at National Security Agency, and when I was at SSA, Social Security Administration, in both situations, they split into regions. So they have 10 regions out there that are almost duplicate regions of different parts of the country. So so I've split that in there. And then basically what happens is that we're invaded. I mean, the weakness within the country is so pronounced that everybody kind of just says, hey, they're right for the taking, and look at the amount of resources we can have if we take this country. So the Chinese and the Russians go over the pole, which they've already proven they can do, and Canada kind of lets them through, which is, I'm glad Sasha's not here. I'm sure he'd fight me on that, but basically Canada says, hey, we're not going to get involved in that. Go for it. Mexico provides. Now Mexico is an ally of Russia right now. In case you ever have question, they are an ally of Russia. They're doing a lot of things with Russia right now. So they just kind of let the Venezuelans come in from the south, and then the west side is the Chinese, and the Japanese kind of sit back and go, not our problem. Hawaii says, hey, Guam, you want to join us in our region? So we're good there. So they're just kind of, they literally split off along with Alaska, and they just kind of do their own thing. So basically the book is about how the invasion has taken place. And it's funny because Iran comes in with a carrier that's given to them by the French, and they do the IFF codes and basically just come, bomb Washington, D.C. So the capital of the country's moved to another area, and in the end it all turns out okay, but it's about these people that are caught in between all these areas. And I try to stay away from race or anything else. In fact, I challenge anybody reading the book to try to figure out the race of any of these people, because it's not there. It's just you could sit there and say, well, I think that person might be black, or I think this person might be Asian. Good luck, because I tried to make it very neutral from that standpoint. So. And at the end, of course, everything turns out okay. Just not to spoil the ending, but basically, and the reason is because finally
they all get married.
An enemy. They all get married. Is that right?
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's and the thing is that that's what we need. We need a common enemy right now. We don't have a common enemy in the United States. We have each other. That's our common enemy. And I think having a common that's why H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds. In H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, it had nothing to do with Mars. It had to do with the Soviet Union, had to do with communism. Basically, he was saying, look, these people are looking at us and very jealously sitting back and saying, when can we make our move? So that's when they can make their move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Bill Danko, we'll go to you since you wrote the famous book, Richer Than a Millionaire, The Millionaire Next Door. What are your thoughts about this? Because sometimes when you read fiction, I remember reading a fiction book. Well, the Soviet Union survived till 1984, and it did till 1993. Then it dissolved, believe it or not, 1993. So when he writes a book like this, the untied states of United States of America, is it possible that the U.S. does divide and get conquered? What are your thoughts, Bill?
Well, certainly the American Civil War shows that it can happen internally. But yeah, Chris makes a good point. We need a common enemy. We don't have that. We are pretty lackadaisical. When I look at the deterioration of our public education system, and the lack of civics, that's, just that, the lack of civics, there's just not a lot of patriotism. That's uniting us. So yeah, I believe it can happen, and we'll all be going to a re-education camp when it's all over.
Yeah, and they do have those in China, so maybe they need to institute those in the United States. Dr. Worthington, what are your thoughts on this United States divided states?
It's interesting. When I read the title of the book, I was thinking entirely of the current political situation in the United States and the invasion from the south of many undocumented aliens every year, and the deliberate policy of this administration to allow that to happen, putting at risk the jobs of many Americans, including minorities and others who have worked so hard to gain their citizenship and to gain a foothold in the United States here legally. And for what purpose? Well, we know who's behind the funding of that mass migration. It happens to be Soros's foundation, a number of other international organizations that like to see, frankly, the United States change its demographics for whatever reason. This isn't to say that this is the quote unquote replacement theory idea, but it's certainly happening. I mean, it's sort of obvious that it's happening. It's happening intentionally, and it's happening through deliberate political choices. And our Trump had our neighbors at the southern border at least cooperating and was trying to vet people coming in and that kind of thing. Biden administration has sort of sent people around the country with cell phones and on jet airplanes, relocating to different areas for whatever purpose, I don't know. But it's an alarming situation. And so this isn't anything about your book, my friend, but it is a serious situation that needs to be addressed in a serious way. If I feel sort of like, well, where's Waldo? And let's hide the ball game simultaneously. So something's going on. I don't know what, but it certainly seems a little bit nefarious to me.
Yes, Dr. Gopin, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, I'm a words guy, so I will change the topic and get back to the book in a sense. The difference between fiction and nonfiction is really difficult to control. Now, Chris started off by saying, it's a novel, it's fiction. So he was upfront about it. He wasn't trying to fool us. But did you hear his recitation of the facts of his novel like I did? Where I was taking it all in as if not simply it could happen, but that it was happening, especially when France gets Iran, this boat. I mean, it just seems so absolutely real. I can perceive it. Really well written fiction gives you the sense that you are inhabiting its world. And we make our judgments about reality within the context of that fictional world, the same way we try to do it in our sometimes not fictional world that we live in. You see, by articulating concepts or even pseudo facts, you can make them real. This is where all this fake news business has really destroyed our ability to know what's going on in the world. God is the only one who can truly create. That is, to make something out of where there was nothing before. It's a godlike attribute, with one exception, I think, for human beings. We create by naming. And that's why the artists are the creators. We create by naming. If you say something, it comes, it's not in that it could be true, but it comes into being because you've said it. Your cat has a litter of 5 kittens, and 4 of them are jet black, and the 5th has spots all over it and is mostly white. You say, we're going to call this one Blackie. You've created something that wasn't there before just by naming it. Alcoholics Anonymous understood this perfectly. You attend a few meetings, you listen, you get up the courage, and then what do? You stand up and you articulate the sentence, hi, my name is Bill and I'm an alcoholic. And by saying it, it has a truth to it, which otherwise cannot be around for everyone to react to. So by making this novel, he has created some of this.
I know I totally agree with you. He's a problem creator, not a problem solver. But anyway, Mark Lee, what are your thoughts about the problems that we're seeing with this divided, united, not states? What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, we definitely have some divisions going on in the United States, and definitely that is one of the things that I think Chris is trying to address in this particular book. And I can even bring up a Texas politician who actually came out recently, I think as recently as yesterday, and was doing some of that division that I think Chris is alluding to, that being Ted Cruz and all of that, because he was blaming social media for the gun violence that is going on out there, and also blaming falling church attendance. And we do know that churches have had some fallen attendance and all of that, even though in this age of the pandemic, I'm not sure exactly how they are doing their metrics and even getting their numbers. And I might want to hear from Chris, since he is a data analysis person and all of that, because it's easy to know how many people are going to a church when the church is strictly a physical location and you can count the people walking in and out of the church and know how many church services you are having. I don't know how to count the amount of people that are watching if quite a few of them are watching online. And we do know that there is quite a bit of online church services, even from some of our major churches and all of that. So he's saying that there's fallen church attendance, and I'm going like, but are we sure of that? Because a lot of folks might be sitting in their homes on a Sunday, or maybe even on a non-Sunday, watching the church services from around the country and even in their local area. So I'm going to toss it back to Chris and see what Chris has got to say, because as I was hearing him talking about fallen church attendance, I'm going like, I can get that on certain churches, because I can definitely go by on a Sunday and not see as many cars or not see as many people, even if it's a church that I might attend on occasion and things along those lines. But then again, I can also get right here on this computer and watch said service, maybe even watch 4 or 5 services. Maybe there are 4 or 5 different churches I want to visit. So am I actually 5 people or am I 1, according to the way that people are counted?
Well, it's really interesting how this is working, because basically what's happening is that you no longer have to, I'm a Catholic. You no longer have to go to mass and turn in your envelope. You can give online. You can give, weekly online, whatever it is. You never have to have money exchange hands. So literally, even if you don't make the mass, you basically are counted within that collection aspect. So it's, and in some cases, it's a situation where like I go to mass on daily mass. It's a lot less people. It's nice. Good sermons are usually good, whatever else. And then I give online, which is fine with me. I give enough. I give enough so that it'll help with the maintenance, keeping the lights on. In the book, basically what happens is that, church services are given, Mark, and the church services are there. And pretty soon the occupying forces say, okay, hey, you can have church services whenever you want. We're just going to have some soldiers posted there just to make sure everybody is safe. The same with the schools, right? Right? Because especially after the school shooting, somebody on the last show brought up, they said, well, maybe we ought to have National Guard people outside the schools. Well, the occupation forces say, yes, absolutely. We're going to have soldiers stationed outside the school just to keep you safe, and maybe in the classrooms, and so all of a sudden it starts to become more pervasive. But people are like, yeah, but they're keeping us safe. So that's okay. So that's my take on the the church services aspect. And you're right. I'll tell you something, Mark, and please don't think me a racist here, but I'll tell you, I remember buddies of mine in the Air Force that used to go to services in the morning at the AMA churches, and they would be there until night. They would go on Sunday morning, and they would be there until 5 o'clock in the evening. I mean, they would have lunch there. They would have activities. They would have study groups. They'd have whatever. Sunday was the day that they would spend at church all day. And it was like, don't you guys get like sick of each other? They said, no, it's community. This is what we do, belonging aspects and all that. I thought, wow, Catholics don't do that. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah. But it's also pretty much different. But Chris, what motivated you to write this particular book? In other words, about the sort of divided states of America. I mean, United States of America.
It was there were news articles from Texas saying Texas wanted to secede from the Union. And I thought, geez, oh man, okay. I mean, and then there were parts of Texas that said, well, we don't want to secede with Texas. We want to have like our own little area, like Austin and those areas. We want to have our own little area here. And then California, the people from California, especially the conservatives from California, are moving down to Texas, and they're moving to Florida. and they're moving to, Mississippi, and they're moving to Alabama, and they're moving to Georgia. It's like, what's going on here? People from New York City, boom, man, they're heading down here. They're coming down here to North Carolina. And what's happening is that they're changing North Carolina from what used to be a solidly red state to a purple state. And soon, I picture in the next 5 years, it's going to be a blue state, basically, Democrat state. So
Hey,
all of a sudden, everybody says, no, enough of that.
Hey,
Go ahead.
Chris, I've got a question. Actually, I want to direct this one maybe to our good friend George and everything, because I love this word that you are a master of and that you study and that you are very much involved in, called rhetoric. And I do know that every time that an election comes around, a lot of people will give a certain rhetorical line and everything. I can't tell you how many times I've had friends of mine, whether they were staunch Democrats or whether they were staunch Republicans, that whoever was going to win would swear up and down that they were going to move to Canada and or Mexico or wherever else they felt like moving to, and all of that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts when you hear that, because I'm sure that being on a university that you've also heard that kind of rhetoric as well, where people will sit there and take that hardline approach, and they'll be like, hey, if that person wins, I'm moving. And they're very adamant about it. And it is definitely, in my sense, very much of a lot of rhetoric, because they're not really going to go anywhere, I don't think, at all. They're just giving us a lot of hype and rhetoric. But I'd love to hear your take on that too.
I think that kind of supposedly hype rhetoric is not falsehood. It's not promises that, I'm not going to keep, or even predictions. I think it's simply an expression of the emotional state of the person.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same as the use of hyperbole. I've done 1,000 things today. Well, heck, I haven't done 1,000. I've done 12. That's a few today. But the term 1,000 conveys the extremity of my feeling burdened. And this is what hell, if he wins, I'm moving to Canada. I really would like to move to Canada because my son lives there and I'd like to be close to him. But that doesn't have to do with who's going to win the next election. No, it's just a way of expression. That's what the study of rhetoric is for me. It's not the art of persuasion, which is what Aristotle and Cicero dealt with it as being. I think rhetoric is everything in a text, whether it's spoken or written or even dance, everything in that text that makes the perceiver of the text interpret it in the way they interpret it. You get 10 people together, they read the same sentence or paragraph or book like Chris's, and you may get 10 relatively different or completely different takes on it. The sentence of you may get 2 or 3 people for each of 3 or 4 interpretations. You can't control that because the reader, the receiver of it, is being affected by different things in that text than that person's neighbor. If I say something to you, the words are part of it. The grammar is part of it. The musical lilt of how the phrase or the sentence proceeds is part of it. Whether or not I nod my head is part of it. My hands, all of this is rhetoric.
Right.
You take it all together, and I study it a bit at a time. You take it all together, then you get the response.
Yeah,
That makes a lot of sense and everything. Hey, Bill, I've got to tease you as well and everything, because you wrote that book about millionaires and everything. And I know that a lot of times everybody that I talk to is always saying how much they would love it to be a millionaire, how much they would love to have the benefits of being a millionaire and all along those lines. But sometimes I wonder about that role in the divisive nature of our society, and also how much of that is rhetoric, because we do know that being a millionaire, while it may be a wonderful thing, it also has its headaches as well. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, because a lot of times everybody's saying, like, of course, I'd love to be a millionaire, be able to jump on a plane and go to, let's pick a country that I want to visit, Kenya or something like that, and then just be able to do it at the drop of a dime. but there are headaches that come with being a millionaire as well. Would you agree with that?
But also, Bill, can you give your story, because that was not really the title of the book to start with, from what I understand. There was some change in the word that was very important. So you could tell us a little bit about that story too.
Yeah, the running title when we were developing it in the early 1990s was called Big Hat, No Cattle. It was about the illusion of wealth that has been pervasive within society. People look at Hollywood and say, well, that's how the wealthy actually operate. Now, look, what Tom Stanley and I did starting in 1973 to when we started writing the book in 1993, we had 20 years of survey research, focus groups, personal interviews, IRS data, Census Bureau data. In other words, we had so many different divergent data sets that actually converged to bring the truths that we reveal within the book. In other words, it's not fiction. It was all based on the empirical method of collecting data, analyzing the data, and asking ourselves, what does it all mean? And so when we had that revelation of, these folks who look so, well off with their, expensive jewelry and their expensive cars, well, we found a lot of those people were just very debt ridden, and they did not have any financial freedom. They were, wage slaves. They had a very nice lifestyle, but as long as they can keep on running on that treadmill, they could support it. When I talk to physicians in particular, they are known to make a lot of money, especially surgeons. But the reality is there's a terminal point when a surgeon can no longer do his or her trade. And it's basically in the mid 50s of age. And when you see some of these surgeons that are quite aged and decrepit trying to ply their trade, you have to wonder, what's going on? Have they not prepared for a retirement and retirement with dignity? So what these millionaire next door, the well-adjusted ones, and that's especially what we talk about in Richer Than a Millionaire, what it means to be not only affluent, but affluent and happy. And it's this idea of being a well-adjusted, charitable, giving, understanding your mortality type person. It's the person who thinks, man, the more I have, the more happy I'll be. That's going to create a lot of problems. And there's a misery index on that. So, yeah. So Mark, point well taken. There are some people with problems in their wealth building because they think that the more they have, the happier they'll be. And of course, that's a myth. And living next door to millionaires, they live modestly, drive used cars, and they just don't have to prove anything to anybody. And that's perhaps the best gift of all, being wealthy.
I have to tease Mr. Worthington as well, because Mr. Worthington made a reference earlier to the folks that are in the Hispanic area. And while there are definitely some that are of the criminal element, and I would definitely agree with him, that come from that community, that come from other communities as well. But what would you say to anybody that might say that some of that conversation that you had earlier in this show as well would be kind of that divisive talk that Chris was alluding to in his book and all along those lines? And I'm not saying that there aren't some bad elements in all societies.
Notice I really didn't say anything about that, Mark. I didn't make any comments about criminals or criminal elements. I think you interpreted it that way. What I said was that there's a deliberate effort internationally and by some folks to move a lot of folks into the United States illegally. I said those folks are taking jobs from other minorities and other Americans who are here legally and trying to work and earn a living and provide for their families. Not once did I say anything about a criminal element. Now that you mention it, however, there is that problem. I don't know to what extent it is. I haven't looked at it at all. I am saying that there is a deliberate effort on the part of some folks to mass migrate folks into the United States, and it's being done illegally. In the United States government at this point is not enforcing the law, and that should be a concern of all U.S. citizens because it dilutes the value of our citizenship and our earning power. Now, there can be some benefits to having folks come to the country in a systematic way because there are jobs available that no one else really wants to take. There are issues in our society that can be, but that has to be done systematically and has to be done from a smart policy standpoint and not just load them up and dump them off and then fly them off with their cell phones to somewhere in Kapitsky or whatever, or Buffalo, or or somewhere in Utah, or wherever that is. I don't see the rationale behind this. I didn't say any of the race baiting comments that you suggested I said in my comments.
If I misunderstood, my apologies and all of that, and I will definitely take that into consideration, everything. But I do know that here on the network, we have had some conversations, and I'd love to hear from everybody's thoughts about this, about, and it kind of comes back to Chris's point, coming back to the book, about this, the division that exists and all of that in society, because even on the immigration policy, when we've had this whole war in Ukraine, we've actually had some Ukrainians that came through the Mexican border. That was actually documented as well. And we've also seen, and me and Chris have had conversations about this, the way that, say, the Haitian immigrants were treated versus the immigrants from the Latin American countries based on political gamemanship and things along those lines. But I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts around that, because it does seem like even the immigration policy isn't necessarily always fair.
Well, since Chris, you were the author of the book, what is, I guess when people write books, there have to be a reason behind. What was the message you're trying to get out of your book? Then I'm going to ask Bill Denko that same question, because I'm just very curious. When you write a book, what are you trying to get the reader to understand or not understand? What's your message? You're muted, Chris, so that makes
Chris does that again.
message. That makes
Sorry.
the message very difficult.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
It's a habit of
So
Chris.
just read.
Sure.
So the idea behind the book is in the beginning, I have an intro, and at the end I have a little note from the author thing. If we do not come together, it's the old, we can hang together or hang separately type of thing.
Right.
It's the idea that, and I think what Mark is bringing out is that, there's a lot of divisiveness in the country because of, Professor George, rhetoric that's being done. Like, for instance, at one point we talked about CRT, critical race theory. And people were up in arms. Oh my God, what are you doing? Trying to kids, blah, blah, blah. So my thing is if I were a politician, I would sit there and I'd say, look, what is the real message here? The real message is that the parents want to have a say in their kids' education. Does anybody disagree with that? Any parent disagree with that? I don't want to have any say in my kids' education. Well, no, not one parent would come up and say, nope, nope, you got it. I don't want anything to do with their education. Of course, yes, I do. So what happens is, as Professor George would say, is that we have a situation where you bring up rhetoric, you make the rhetoric emotional, and then it kicks in that emotion, and people say, you're a bunch of socialists. Well, yeah, you're a bunch of reactionaries. Yeah, you're gun-owning, toad-owning, racist. You'd kill everybody if you could, blah, 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 because it just goes to, there was a lot, I taught logic for a while, and they call it something. They call it an actual, I forget what they call it, name calling, basically is what it is.
Ad hominem.
And it gets ad hominem attacks. And that's basically what it was. So, the idea is nobody's looking at this stuff logically. And I thought, well, I'll throw out a book there that says, hey, look, we can either act together as a nation and stop this hyphenation bullcrap that's been going on for decades. Look, you're an American with a heritage of this. You're an American with a African heritage. You're American with Italian heritage. You're American with all that. We used to have a thing called the Sons of Italy. I don't know whether you guys ever heard of it. My father took me to a Sons of Italy meeting, and it was just hilarious because it was just a bunch of guys sitting there playing cards. I said, and I think I was 6, and I said, Dad, what? Yeah. He says, son, you're a son of Italy. This is, when you get old enough, you can come here. And I thought, and drink and play cards. Okay, I'm 6 years old. All right, I get it. But the bottom line is that all happened. Bill, when Bill did his book, now, granted, I've not read his book. From his explanation and everything else, it's not that everyone can become a millionaire. It's that, look, here is the environment around that, and then these are the areas where people can grab onto and talk about, okay, what is it, what does it take, and what is it about being a millionaire? So it sounds like a good book to me. I mean, I've read Fortune's Formula, Bill, by William Poundstone, and trust me, I think yours would be a more entertaining read. It was an interesting read, but I'm sure yours is more entertaining than that.
It's not entertaining. It's a bloody great book, Chris. I'm just going to let you know, I started following Bill Danko's books in 1985. Okay, I picked up his.
God, were there books? Were there books?
Yeah,
Then,
he
Nick?
actually he wrote a book.
Papyrus?
Him and Tom Stanley wrote this book called Marketing to the Affluent back in 1985, and I picked it up. It's not still on my shelf. I have his other books on my shelf. I wish I still had it, because when I read it, I fell out of my chair, because what the book was about was I was dealing in the estate planning area, which Dan Worthington also dealt with, and I noticed my rich clients were bloody cheap. They clipped coupons. They looked for every tax-free municipal bond they could buy. They didn't want to pay taxes, and they didn't even want to pay my legal fees. I was thinking, gosh, I'm now dealing with a millionaire. I can finally get big fees. No. And then I started dealing with a guy that had not a millionaire. He paid $1 million a year in taxes, and he still didn't want to pay any fees. They were all bloody cheap. It was like this eye awakening. And so I read his book back in 1985. I was going, these people are different on how they think, and how we are taught how they think and how they really think are totally different. So with that, that's a big plug for Bill Danko's book, which I honestly believe it should be in every high school education curriculum out there, because you get this myth on who millionaires are, and then there's the reality, and then he has the new book Richer Than a Millionaire, which also takes off on that concept. So with that Bill, not that that's a shameless plug, you sold 4 million copies. I was probably one of your first buyers, but I did remember it's a fact book. It's not fiction. It's based on facts, reality, interviews. It's absolutely amazing. So if people that want to become a millionaire, they really need to read this, because they think differently. So I'll turn that over to you, Bill.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Nick. It goes back to the 1970s and 80s when Tom Stanley and I were doing, the basic groundwork for this for these books. One of the anecdotes that really resonates, we were doing some work for a trust department dealing with Deca millionaires. And, where are the gold Rolexes? Where are the Armani suits? They were just regular folks who had a very high net worth. And I naively went up to one of these Deca millionaires and said, "Sir, may I offer you a glass of Bordeaux 70? And he looked at me and said, "Son, there are 2 kinds of beer that I drink, Free and Budweiser." And that opening anecdote, introduces the basic concept of the millionaire next door, that there are a lot of folks who are living way beyond their means, and they look it too. They have the latest car, the latest everything, the biggest house. But these ordinary millionaires who have a lot of financial freedom, so when we were dealing with trust departments and high net worth individuals, we really got some of the best insights as to what regular people they really were, the real genuine ones, who own fuel oil distribution businesses. They own a chain of hardware stores. They own dry cleaning establishments or car wash facilities. Not everyone is an architect or a brain surgeon or an attorney, although there certainly are some. There are even some university professors who are in the millionaire category. Isn't that right, Professor?
Hey, Bill, guess what? You may not know this, but there's a very popular area here in Durham called Black Wall Street and everything. And there were several people that actually made their money and had a tremendous amount of success, and definitely got their fame and fortune during the heyday of that period. And one of the ways that they did it is they went to a certain college, and I'm actually going to describe what that college is and everything very shortly. But they went to a certain college because they had the access to some very rich folks, including the Dukes, the ones that are the founders of that university where Mr. Gopin is at, and everything. So they went to Duke and had all of that, and they also had access, I believe, to some Carnegies and some maybe even Rockefellers back in the day and everything. Do you know what they were doing in order to have access to all of those folks?
I don't.
They were cutting their hair. Mr. Merrick was actually the
Okay.
barber to all of those guys. So he
Oh.
was actually getting an education from actually listening to them make their business deals while he was cutting their hair. And then he brought that back to the black part of the African American part of Durham. So there were the lessons that he learned
for
from
him.
cutting their hair. So he was literally cutting their hair and listening to them make deals with like the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and the Dukes and all of that. And that is literally what was one of the founding factors of what is called Black Wall Street, because he literally was cutting their hair and listening and absorbing the information and then bringing it to his own community.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Trickle down economics.
Yeah, they think totally differently.
Exactly.
Now, Dan, you were on the South Dakota Trust Company, so when you meet with these people, did you find them in your practice to be? I'm not going to use the word cheap because Dr. Gopin will slap me. Use the word parsimonious. It's a better
Or frugal.
Frugal, yeah.
Yeah, so I can't use the word cheap. So what are your thoughts, Dr. Worthington?
Well, the folks that create multi-generational trusts and do sophisticated estate planning are a little bit in a different place. They are deliberate in trying to preserve the family wealth and legacy. Many of them also have family foundations and try to do great charitable good at the same time. But they're trying to run efficient, family-based or multi-generational based family enterprises, and so that's a little bit different. I think they try to have more of a plan in place, objectives, long-term strategic planning, that kind of thing, purpose-driven kinds of planning, and like everybody else, nobody likes to pay their legal bills, right?
Right.
They like
Yeah,
to pay trustee fees either.
Yeah, they don't like to pay trustee fees, but I also noticed that the people that are merely affluent, like medical doctors, fall in that merely affluent category that Bill Danko described. In other words, the 1.5 to maybe 10 million. But the wealthy clients I dealt with, the ones that really knocked the socks off, they were in these mundane businesses that you would think that they couldn't become wealthy on, like Dunkin' Donuts, the guy who, he what he did is he sold donuts. I mean, it was Bill Rosenberg didn't really have a medical degree or a law degree. He sold donuts and then franchised it, and that was where the founding family of Coca-Cola, they sold Coke. They sold, Coca-Cola bottles. But they were in mundane businesses. They weren't in these, they weren't doing anything really that exciting, I would say. And then on modern investing, I ran into this stock called MPLX. It is a boring stock, but if people want to make money, you just go. What do? They are oil and gas pipelines. I mean, you got to imagine one of the most boring business in the world is just transporting oil and natural gas through pipelines.
We have to tease folks. So I have to tease you because they weren't just selling Coke. Because let's be honest about it and everything. If we studied the early history of Coke, it actually had a certain drug element to it as well, because that was in there before they got rid of it and everything.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Selling some doctored Coca-Cola and everything because it was doctored totally.
As a Candler, because it was the Candler family that were my clients, they founded Coca-Cola years ago, and so today they really say, well, we hold very little stock in it. In other words, they don't have any real influence, but still have enough to carry their basic $500 million to $1 billion net worth, which is, I would say, a little bit above your millionaire next door. Because what you need, Bill, is the book, The Decamillionaire and the Centimillionaire, who doesn't live next door.
I have the book called The Trillionaire Next Door, someplace on my shelf.
Oh, really? The Trillionaire Next Door.
It's written by a comedic writer. But,
those, yeah, what I'd
There's a
say.
trillionaire next door to you, Bill. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
I've got
so-
a few wealthy neighbors. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
look,
yeah, no.
But here's the thing, and to Dan's point, creating this intergenerational wealth, one of the things we demonstrate is that, it takes a lot of gumption and focus and perseverance to build that wealth initially. But then when you become an inheritor, it's easy come, easy go, unfortunately. And you get, 3 or 4 generations out into the future, and you'll find that wealth is often dissipated.
That's the goal, is to not make it easy come, easy go.
Yeah.
To tie it to incentives, to creation, to genius, to making the world a better place, and not just creating a handout or ski bums spending their time up in Vail. And, because if you're not going to be a contributing member of society and doing something to give back, then what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the idea behind these multi-generational discretionary trusts. Now, you can't make people do anything. They have to kind of come about it on their own. It's just sort of like anybody that has a problem, whether it's drug addiction or whatever it is. They've got to decide to change. Same thing is true of kids that are coming up. But if you give them the right kind of educational and experiential opportunities to participate in the community of doing well and doing good, then they get an education they cannot get in the university setting.
Mm-hmm.
And they can see the connection between wealth and responsibility. And that helps them to shape and become more informed about what it really means to have a stewardship of wealth. And
Mhm.
that's the kind of idea that you really need. It isn't their money. It belongs to to God and to doing good, right? I mean, that's the idea behind stewardship. Too many, even in the beginning in the foundation of our nation, Adam Smith wrote about the about the economic system in the United States, but it was based on the idea of public virtue, of
Mhm.
connection, of righteousness, of goodness. And I think to some extent we have lost that element in our society by the promotion of all these social ideals that don't make any difference anymore and tend to disrupt and decay our social institutions and the morals of our nation. And that is a huge problem in our country. And we know where that leads. We've seen many, many civilizations who have been here before. And that's why there needs to be change. But we can't make anybody do anything, right?
No, I agree. Hey, Dan,
Well,
and this is
wait a
for
minute.
both
Well,
Dan
hold
and-
on 1 second. Before we
Yeah,
go
go
into
ahead.
that, let's say, Dan, it's not that you're an Ed D, right? So it's not that we make people go down a certain road. It's that we teach people basic values and principles and concepts, and then we let them make the decision as to where they want to go, hoping that they take the right path with the values and principles and concepts that we have as their foundation.
Exactly.
Well, and that's actually what I was
Right.
going to ask both Dan and Nick, and I'd love to hear both of their thoughts on this, because I oftentimes hear people talk in all kinds of groups and all kinds of classes and ethnicities and everything about a concept called generational wealth. And I know that I am fortunate enough that the property that my grandparents acquired and everything is now going to go into its third generation, because definitely there is some mom and her sisters have their generation, and I have some cousins that, because of the loss of their parents, are now that third generation. So I know that exists, but on the opposite side, there is a African American newspaper here that is not going into that kind of phase, because they were in 2 generations. It was actually the African American paper here in Durham. I think it might have even been around for 3 or 4 generations. But the current owner, it looks like he has no interest in going into the newspaper field. So that will probably just vanish, what little property that is. And it's on a small plot of land, so it's not like a lot of plot of land, but it is in a prominent community. So he may get lots of money. He may go for the money instead of the legacy and all of that. But I was just wondering everybody's thoughts as to whether generational wealth is as popular as it used to be, because we used to hear definitely the Rockefellers and all these rich families that would pass it on from generation to generation. And I do hear that conversation going on, but I don't know how active it is. So I was just wondering, does everybody feel that generational wealth is encouraged as much as it used to be? I guess that's
If you go the 4 places I started my law practice, Naples, Fort Myers, Boca Raton, and Palm Beach, it is important. It's not only the conversation, it is the only conversation. Now, as you get outside those areas, maybe not as important, but I'll tell you, my thinking is, Mark, it's a club. I mean, the thing is, yeah, go to Naples in January, February, and March. Go to Palm Beach, January, February, and March. Go to Boca or even Fort Myers, Sanibel. All you're going to hear is about the stuff that Dan Worthington talks about. In every bar, every corner. I mean, it's like, forget abortion, immigration, forget you're going to split America apart. They could care less. Hate to say that, Chris.
No,
What they care about is
good.
their money, protecting it, and lots of it. That's what they care about. Abortion, immigration, and what's the other 3 things that they're running on today? Gun control. Gun control. Rich people don't give a rat's rear about that. They care about dividends, stocks, bonds, their closely held business interests, and how to make more money, and how to pass it so their kids don't have to pay huge estate taxes.
You know something, Mark.
You'll listen to that on every bar. You won't listen to all this other garbage stuff that poor people listen to.
And that's the importance of. Oh, go ahead.
But Dan, I know you're going to agree with this. Probably everyone on the panel agree with this. But we talk about generational wealth, right, Mark? I see farmland going to developers. Why? Because the kids don't want to farm. The kids don't want to do that. They'd rather take their they'd rather take their $15 million, $20 million, $25 million, whatever it is, and walk away from that. Now, also, I have a very close relative who is a farmer, and he lives right next door to an airport. And the FAA has come to him and said, hey, we'd like to buy some of your land. And he said, well, how much are you going to give me? And they said, oh, we're going to give you this. And he says, no, I'm not going to do it. And he says, here's my price, And they go, well, we're never going to come up with that. And he says, that's really funny because last year you offered me less than you offered me this year. So I figure if I keep farming within the next 10, 20 years, you're going to offer me just the right amount. And I'll say bye-bye. And by that time I'll be finished farming and my kids will own the farm and they'll have to make a decision as to what they want to do. So the bottom line is we're losing a lot of farmland. And I'll tell you what we're losing a lot of farmland to is people that just don't want to farm. They're just they're done. So they want richness like you, Nick. Like you say, they want their stocks and bonds, and they want to be able to mess with that money in their hands. They don't want to realize that, oh my God, we're in a drought. We're not going to make as much money this year. Screw that. I'll take the $15 million and I'll invest it, and I'll be good for the rest of my life, kids' life, grandkids' life, everyone's life.
Yeah, and you can't blame them, can you?
No,
but only to a certain extent.
Right.
That's why it's important to create a connection between wealth and responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that is the key. That is the key to creating successful generations.
Good.
Is by creating that connection and empowering that piece of the American genius that Tocqueville talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Warren Buffett on a micro level said, if you have all this great wealth, what about the next generation? He says, well, give your children enough so that they can do anything, but not so much so they can do nothing. Right. And so when you put it in that context, you want to get that next generation better and better. But look at the Gates Foundation. They already have a time bomb in their foundation. 50 years after the death of the principals, all the money has to be dissipated. Because they know, what's going to go on 50 years, 100 years from now? There's going to be all sorts of different attitudes about everything. So let's just get rid of the money within a reasonable 2-generation lifetime.
Right. Rather than keep it around. Well, Carnegie did the same thing, basically, but he had a problem giving away so much because he just had so much. But he used a lot of it to create libraries and other institutions.
That's right.
He did a lot of good.
I went to a church in New Kensington, Pennsylvania, where they took the Carnegie, the Mellon Mansion, And the Mellon Mansion was given to this church, literally given to it. Said, here's the, and they redid the entire mansion, took the railings out, made different areas. They made the entire church out of the Mellon Mansion, the marble, everything. They took it all down and made this church. So, I mean,
and Carnegie Mellon is still a major player even now, because I do know that the Hayti Heritage Center actually is in the middle of, and that's the African American Cultural Arts Center in Durham, is in the middle of closing out. I think it's a 3 or 4 year grant that Carnegie Mellon gave to upgrade a lot of their equipment and to do programming and a number of other things. So they were one of several institutions that got that money around the country and all of that. But definitely the Mellon Foundation just recently gave them money over the last 4 or 5 years. I know it was before the pandemic, and that money is now still being dealt with.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, I think the Gates is because I knew the attorney that was handling the estate. Part of the reason why they were doing all this, Bill, is that he gets hit with a huge federal estate tax unless he creates his foundation, starts dumping money into the foundation. So you actually get an income tax deduction, and Dan knows this, as you make contributions to your foundation, plus you eliminate the estate tax, then you put your family members on the foundation.
Right.
So a lot of it is it's just a complete tax play. In other words, to not have to pay the federal estate tax, and then you promote it to the general public. Look, all the good that I'm doing. You see what I mean? Oh.
I remember, I think it was a Forbes magazine interview with Bill Gates when he was asked how much he's going to give his kids. He said, well, they're only going to get $10 million each. I don't want to spoil them.
Right. Yeah. And 10 million, even in today's economy, you could probably live okay. You know,
Yeah, right.
in spite of the inflation.
They'll
So
get by.
I'm not,
It'll be gone.
Yeah. Well, you can also run through it pretty fast. Okay.
Yeah, well, when dad's a billionaire and you only get crummy 10 million, come on.
Yeah, I know. You better get. Well, it gives them incentive to go to work, Bill.
That's
I
right,
mean,
exactly.
Hey, look, if you're only getting 10 million, you better go back to work. With that, I'd like to thank our panelists, the Bill Danko, the co-author of The Millionaire Next Door, and also, if you haven't got this one, his latest book, co-author of Richer Than a Millionaire. Also like to thank Dan Worthington, who's the former Associate Dean of the University of South Dakota School of Law and also South Dakota's Trust Company, George Gopin, who's our professor of rhetoric at Duke University, Chris Greco, who wrote this new book, Untied States of America, and also Mark Lee, the producer at the Pod TV network, which we're well over 100,000 viewers now, if you can imagine that. And we have our own channel on Roku. So all you do is go to Roku, type in Pod TV, and you will see our network beaming into 122 countries. So we do want to thank all of our viewers, and we'll see you next week on the Media Channel. Until then, have a great Memorial Day
Thank you
weekend.
all.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Have a
you.
great one.